Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Qui c'est qui comprend pas l'anglais? Donc on continue le Prabhu Lilamrita, écrit par Sa Santé Satsarupdas Goswami Maharaj. Et on en est au chapitre Swami invites the hippies. Roger Segal had grown up in New York. He was following a Hatha Yoga guru, had experimented with psychedelic chemicals, and had traveled in the deep south as a civil rights activist, taking part in freedom marches with the blacks. Large-bodied, sociable, and outgoing, he had lots of friends in San Francisco. At the airport, in a merry mood, with the 8 Ashbury crowd, he had seen Swamiji for the first time and been specially struck by Swamiji's regal bearing and absence of self-consciousness. The concept of reincarnation had always intrigued him, but after attending some of Swamiji's lectures and hearing him explain transmigration of the soul, he felt he had found someone who definitely knew the answer to any question about life after death. One night, after attending the program at the temple, Roger returned to his apartment and sat down on the fire escape to meditate on what Swamiji had said. The world is false, he had said. But it feels real to me, Roger thought. If I pinch my arm, I feel pain. So how is that illusion? This fire escape is real. Otherwise, I would be falling in space. This space is real, isn't it? Roger decided he didn't understand what Swamiji meant by illusion. If I tried to walk through the wall, he thought, would that be real or not? Maybe the world's reality just in my mind. To test the illusion, he went inside his apartment, concentrated his mind, and walked against the wall. Smack. He sat down again and thought, what does Swamiji mean when he says that the world is illusion? He decided he should ask at the next meeting. He did. And Srila Prabhupada told him that actually the world is real because it was created by God, the supreme reality. But it is unreal in the sense that everything material is temporary. When a person takes the temporary world to be permanent and all in all, he is in illusion. Only the spiritual world, Swamiji explained, is eternal and therefore real. Quelqu'un peut expliquer la réponse de Srila Prabhupada là? Si on dit est-ce que le monde est illusion, qu'est-ce que vous pouvez répondre? C'est quoi l'explication, la bonne explication?
Il est réel mais temporaire.
Ouais. Et c'est quoi qui est illusion alors?
C'est notre conception, notre vision qui est illusoire.
Exactement.
Mais la création de Krishna est parfaite, que ce soit temporaire ou éternel, c'est la perfection.
C'est réel.
Réel.
Elle existe bien. Donc c'est la parfaite raison. Ce qui est illusion, c'est notre idée de penser qu'il est permanent.
In English.
In English also should I speak in English?
Well, that's what you said.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we do everything in English. So yeah, you get the right answer. I ask is what is the definition of illusion then according to what we just read? So Prabhuji said actually the material world is real, the spiritual world is real. Both are real actually. Only illusion is to take this world for permanent. Our conception of this world is illusion. Roger was satisfied by Swamiji's answer, but he had other difficulties. He thought Swamiji too conservative. When Swamiji said that people's dog must be kept outside the temple, Roger didn't like it. Many visitors brought pet dogs with them to the temple, and now there was a hitching post in front of the building just to accommodate the pets on leashes. But Swamiji wouldn't allow any pets inside. This philosophy is for humans, he said. A cat or dog cannot understand it. Although, if he hears the chanting of Hare Krishna, he can receive a higher birth in the future. Roger also had other points of contention with what he considered Swamiji's conservative philosophy. Swamiji repeatedly spoke against uncontrolled habits like smoking, but Roger couldn't imagine giving up such things. And the instructions about restricting sex life especially bothered him. Yet, despite his not following very strictly, Roger felt himself developing a love for Swamiji and Krishna. He sensed that Swamiji had much to teach him, and that Swamiji was doing it in a certain way and a certain order. Roger knew that Swamiji saw him as a baby in spiritual life who had to be spoon-fed. He knew he had to become submissive and accept whatever Swamiji gave him. Quelqu'un sait qui est devenu, somebody knows who became Roger?
Maybe Ravinder Sarup.
Who?
Maybe Ravinder Sarup.
Because it starts with
Upananda.
No.
I don't think so.
Guru Das.
Guru Das?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
He's a pioneer.
It seems like Prabhupada said, impossible mission, no? To convert people who are not following anything to people who have to follow everything.
Guru Das is Malachi husband, yeah?
No, he was married with Jamuna,
Aha, yeah.
and he was a pioneer of the Hare Krishna movement in San Francisco, and then he went to London with the other couples to meet the Beatles, and then to India. He met many dignitaries, President Indira Gandhi, everything like that. He did a fantastic service. He's still trying to help all devotees who are, going to pass away. Give them some, decent material and spiritual end of life.
Sam Spierstra, I think this is Sama Sundar.
Yes.
Tall and slender with curly reddish gold hair, that's him. Was athletic, he had trained as an Olympic skier. Yet artistic, he was a writer and wood sculptor. He had graduated from Reed College in Oregon and gone on a Fulbright scholar to a small college in Switzerland, where he had obtained an MA in philosophy. He was popular, as Mukunda saw him, the epitome of the rugged individualist. When Mukunda had visited Sam at his mountain lookout tower and told him about Swamiji and Krishna consciousness, Sam had been intrigued by the new ideas. Sam's life had nearly reached a dead end, but he had seen hope in what Mukunda and Janaki had been saying about Swamiji. After spending only a few days with Mukunda, Sam had been eager to help him establish a temple of Krishna consciousness in San Francisco. So you know the story, huh? He was in a watchtower in the forest. He had to watch for fires. He would stay with his to be wife, Malati, and they were living just with their dog, I think. And one day Mukunda was already initiated, maybe, with his wife Janaki. They came from New York to San Francisco, and they stopped on the way. And they just told him, about this project of opening a center in San Francisco, and they left the watchtower to get into the adventure. And it was really an adventure for many years. Sam was the one who knew the local rock stars and had persuaded them to appear at the Avalon with Swami Bhaktivedanta, whom he had never met. Sam had seen Swamiji for the first time when Swamiji had arrived at the San Francisco airport, and Sam had later insisted that he had seen a flash or light come from Swamiji's body. At first, Sam had been afraid to say anything, nor had he know what to say. Prabhupada was completely new to him and seemed so elevated. But the day after the program at the Avalon, when Mukunda told Prabhupada that Sam had arranged the dance, Prabhupada sent for him to find out how much money they had made. Sitting across from Prabhupada, who sat behind his small desk, Sam informed him that they had made about $1,500 profit. Well, then, Srila Prabhupada said, "You will be the treasurer." Then Srila Prabhupada asked him, "What is your idea of God?" "God is one," Sam replied. Prabhupada asked, "What is the purpose of worshipping God?" Sam replied, "To become one with God." "No," Prabhupada said, "you cannot become one with God. God and you are always two different individuals, but you can become one in interest with Him." And then he told Sam about Krishna. After they talked, Prabhupada said, you can come up every day and I will teach you how to do books. C'est-à-dire bookkeeping. So Sam began meeting with Prabhupada for half an hour a day to learn bookkeeping. Sam, I had never been very good at keeping books, and I really didn't want to do it. But it was a good excuse to come and see Swamiji every day. He would chew me out when I would spend too much money or when I couldn't balance the books properly. I really loved the idea that he was so practical, that he knew bookkeeping. He became so much more of a friend from the beginning, rather than some idealized person from another sphere of life. I took almost all my practical questions to him. I learned to answer things for myself based on the way Swamiji always answered day-to-day problems. And the first thing he made me do was to get married to my girlfriend. Mukunda and his wife Janaki, whose apartment was just down the hall from Prabhupada, were the only couple Srila Prabhupada had already initiated and married. Mukunda would often wear his strand of large red japa beads in two loose loops around his neck. He had grown long hair and a short, thick black beard since coming to San Francisco. He had entered the summer of love spirit of 8 Ashbury and was acquainted with many of the popular figures. Although occasionally earning money as a musician, he spent most of his time promoting Prabhupada's mission, especially by meeting people to arrange gala programs like the one at the Avalon. He was a leader in bringing people to assist Prabhupada, yet he had no permanent sense of commitment. He was helping because it was fun. Having little desire to be different from his many San Francisco friends, he did not strictly follow Prabhupada's principles for regulated spiritual life. In his exchanges with Srila Prabhupada, Mukunda liked to assume a posture of fraternal camaraderie rather than one of manual servitude, and Srila Prabhupada reciprocated. Sometimes, however, Prabhupada would assert himself as the teacher. Once, when Prabhupada walked into Mukunda's apartment, he noticed a poster on the wall showing a matador with a cap and sword going after a bull. "This is a horrible picture," Srila Prabhupada exclaimed, his face showing displeasure. Mukunda looked at the poster, realizing for the first time what it meant. "Yes, it is horrible," he said, and tore it off the wall. They really didn't know anything. In his book, Mukunda Maharaj, he tells how one day he was driving Prabhupada in a car, maybe around this time, and surely the very beginning, because then they went to a program, they went to see some Indian members, very wealthy, the lady was like wife of an ambassador or something. So she gave, before they left, she gave as a gift to Prabhupada, she gave a big date. these dates, big dates of Kabul or something like this. So on the way back, Mukunda was driving, and Prabhupada he took out the date from the aluminium paper, and he took a bite, and then he gave it to Mukunda. And Mukunda is very honest, Mukunda Goswami, so he said, for me it seems really disgusting, to bite after somebody, so with the saliva, but he didn't want to look like, like, because they used to do this kind of thing, so among hippies, like drink from the same bottle. So he took it, and he took a bite, and then he gave it to Prabhupada back. Prabhupada said, no, thank you. Srila Prabhupada was eager to have someone play the Mridanga properly during the kirtans, and Mukunda, a musician, was a likely candidate. Mukunda. The day the drum came, I asked Swamiji if I could learn, and he said yes. I asked him when, and he said, when do you want? Now? I asked. He said yes. I was a little surprised to get such a quick appointment, but I brought the drum to his room, and he began to show me the basic beat. First, there was a gi-ta-ta, 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 and then one slightly more complicated beat, gi-ta-ta, 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 gi-ta. As I began to play the beat, I kept speeding it up, and he kept telling me to slow down. He spent a lot of time just showing me how to strike the heads of the drum. Then I finally began to get it a little, but he had to keep admonishing me to slow down and pronounce the syllables as I hit the drum, gi-ta-ta. The syllables, he said, and the drum should sound the same. I should make it sound like that and always pronounce them. I was determined and played very slowly for a long, long time. I was concentrating with great intensity. Then suddenly, I was aware of Swamiji standing motionless beside me. I didn't know how long he was going to stand there without saying anything, and I became a little uncomfortable, but I continued playing. When I got up the courage to look up and see his face, to my surprise, he was moving his head back and forth in an affirming way with his eyes closed. He seemed to be enjoying the lesson. This came as a complete surprise to me. Although I had taken music lessons and had spent many years taking piano lessons, I can never remember an instance when the teacher seemed to actually enjoy my playing. I felt very wonderful to see that there was a teacher who was so perfect, who enjoyed what he was teaching so much. Not because it was his personal teaching or his personal method, but because he was witnessing Krishna's energy pass through him, to a conditioned soul like myself. And he was getting great pleasure out of it. I had a deeper realization that Swamiji was a real teacher, although I had no idea what a spiritual master really was. If you want to make comments or ask questions, feel free anytime. Anybody wants to say something about this? Simple, huh? To Mukunda's wife, Janaki, Krishna consciousness meant dealing in a personal way with Swamiji. As long as he was around, she was alright. She enjoyed asking him questions, serving him, and learning from him how to cook. She didn't care much for studying the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, but she quickly developed an intense attraction for him, Janaki. There were a group of us sitting around in Swamiji's apartment, and I asked him if he had any children. He looked at me as if I had said something strange, and he said, "You are not my child?" I said, "Well, yes." And he said, "Are not all these my children?" And his answer was so quick that I never doubted that he seriously meant what he said. I was looking yesterday at memories, and when they were here, I don't remember who was saying the same thing, that he was sitting with Prabhupada in his room and with few devotees, and Prabhupada said, he told them how in the beginning he had these dreams, his Guru Maharaj came in his dream and said, come with me, and he was thinking, how can I live? I have my children. It's horrible. Take sannyas and live. So, and he said, finally, I left my children. He had 5 children or something. And he said, but now I have so many children. They felt like, ooh. For several hours each morning, Prabhupada showed Janaki, John, and others how to cook. One day in the kitchen, he noticed a kind of berry he had never tasted, and he asked Janaki what they were. She told him, strawberries. He immediately popped one into his mouth, saying, that's very tasty. And he proceeded to eat another and another, exclaiming, very tasty. One time Janaki was making whipped cream when Prabhupada came into the kitchen and asked, what's that? She replied, it's whipped cream. What is this whipped cream? He asked. It's cream, she replied, but when you beat it, it fluffs up into a more solid form. Although always adamant about kitchen rules, one of the most important being that no one could eat in the kitchen, Srila Prabhupada immediately dipped his finger into the whipped cream and tested it. This is yogurt, he said. In a light-hearted, reprimanding way, that was our pleasure. Janaki replied, no, Swamiji, it's whipped cream. Srila Prabhupada corrected her, no, it is yogurt. And again, he put his finger into it and tested it, saying, oh, it tastes very nice. Swamiji, Janaki accused him, you are eating in the kitchen. Srila Prabhupada merely smiled and shook his head back and forth, saying, that is all right. Janaki, one time I told him, Swamiji, I had the most exciting dream. Oh, yeah. We were all on a planet of our very own, and everybody from Earth had come there. They had all become pure devotees, and they were all chanting. You were sitting on a very special chair, high off the ground. Il n'y avait pas de Vyasasana à l'époque, and there was no Vyasasana yet at the time. So you were sitting on a very special chair, high off the ground, and the whole earth was clapping and chanting Hare Krishna. Swamiji smiled and said, oh, that's such a lovely dream.
Hey, something, because it comes to this story which is not connected with Prabhupada Lilamrita, but with his activity now somehow, if you allow me to say, is one Mataji in Ukraine, I think so. She was devotee, initiated devotee, and her husband was not devotee, and he passed away. And he was more or less like tolerate her Krishna consciousness. Let's say.
More or less what?
Tolerate, but
okay.
she is devotee. And then when he passed away, he started to come here in a dream and explain what's going on. And he says, we stand in somewhere waiting on big queue and something not good expecting in this queue. And he explained how he's feeling. Every day he says something. But your Prabhupada come and take all of yours, means devotees from this queue to take with him. And she was really impressed that even those who maybe not was deserved to get to the spiritual world. So Prabhupada, yes, this Prabhupada, yeah. He came and take all of the who is in movement. Something like that.
He had a dream like this. Anyway, many dreams. Prabhupada said that the spiritual master can manifest in dreams, especially when he has left the planet. Bonnie MacDonald, age 19, and her boyfriend, Gary McElroy, 20, had both come to San Francisco from Austin, where they had been living together as students at the University of Texas. Bonnie was a slight, fair blonde with a sweet southern drawl. She was born and raised in southeast Texas in a Baptist family. In high school, she had become agnostic, but later, while traveling in Europe and studying the religious art there and the architecture of the great cathedrals, she had concluded that these great artists couldn't have been completely wrong. Gary, the son of a US Air Force officer, had been raised in Germany, Okinawa, and other places around the world before his family had settled in Texas. His dark hair and bushy brows gave him a scolding look, except when he smiled. He was one of the first students at the University of Texas to wear long hair and experiment with psychedelic drugs. While taking LSD together, he and Bonnie had become obsessed with the idea of going on a spiritual search, and without notifying their parents or school, they had driven to the West Coast in search of someone who could teach us about spiritual life. They had spent a few frustrating months searching through spiritual books and among spiritual groups in Haight-Ashbury. They had become vegetarians. Gary had started teaching himself to play electric guitar, while Bonnie had gone to Golden Gate Park every day to perform a self-styled hatha yoga meditation. But gradually they had become disillusioned and had felt themselves becoming degraded from drugs. When the disciple is ready, the guru will appear, they had read. And they had waited eagerly for the day when their guru would come. Although Bonnie had spent most of her time in the parks of San Francisco, one day she had been looking through a table full of magazines in a Haight-Ashbury head shop when she had found a copy of Back to Godhead, the mimeograph journal produced by Srila Prabhupada's disciples in New York. She had been particularly attracted to Ayagriva's article about Swamiji. The descriptions of Swamiji's smile, his bright eyes, his pointed two shoes, and the things he had said had given her a feeling that this might be the guru she had been looking for. And when she had learned that this same Swamiji had opened an ashram in Haight-Ashbury, she had immediately started searching through the neighborhood until she had found the temple on Frederick Street. Before Bonnie and Gary met Swamiji, they had both been troubled. Gary was in anxiety about the threat of being drafted into the army, and both of them were disillusioned because they had not found the truth they had come to San Francisco to find. So, on meeting Srila Prabhupada in his room, they began to explain their situation. Bonnie, he was sitting in a rocking chair in his little apartment, and he looked at us like we were crazy, because we were, and said, "You come to my classes. Simply come to my classes every morning and every evening, and everything will be all right." That sounded to us like an unbelievable panacea, but because we are so bewildered, we agreed to it. I told him I had traveled all over Europe, and he said, "Oh, you have traveled so much." Oh, that's I think this is Govinda Dasi. Govinda Dasi with her husband Goranga Sundar. Huh? Goranga Sundar, I think. Huh? Gora Sundar? Okay. And I said to him, "Yes, I have traveled too much." I think she was 16 when she came to the movement. "Yes, I have traveled so much. I've done so many things. But none of it ever made me happy." He was pleased with that statement. He said, "Yes, that is the problem." We began going to his morning lectures. For us, it was a long distance to get there at 7 in the morning. But we did it every morning with the conviction that this was what he had said to do, and we were going to do it. Then one day he asked us, "What do you do?" When we said that formerly we had been art students at college, he told us to paint pictures of Krishna. Shortly after that, we asked to be initiated. I was just listening yesterday to a pastime somebody, one Mataji, what's her name? Forgot her name, but one Prabhupada disciple, she, you have, maybe some of you heard this past time that I read about Back to Godhead that reminded me that she was in Mayapur, that was the end of 76 or something, and she was in Mayapur, and one day one sadhu came to the temple, and he was carrying a Back to Godhead magazine with him, and he was very excited, the old sadhu, Indian sadhu, and he said, are you disciples of Bhaktivedanta Swami? They said, yes. So he said, and he was very excited, and he said, I have something to tell you very important. And he said, I'm the Pujari in Advaita Bhavan, the house of Advaitacharya, which is in Mayapur. And he said, many years ago, he was Pujari there maybe for his whole life, practically speaking. And he said, when I was very young, I was Pujari there, and there was, it's like a house actually, it's a very simple temple, like this is Mayapur. And there was this Grihastha sadhu was coming, quite often, and he would sit at the back of the temple, and he would chant on his mala very softly, very deeply, and he was weeping. And I was looking at him, thinking who he was, and he was coming regularly like this, but I never dared to approach him, and I was thinking, who is this person, And then for some time I didn't see him, and then one day I saw a sannyasi, a swami, coming to the temple and sit exactly at the same place, and he started to chant exactly at this, same way, weeping, and so I realized, he said that this was the same person. So I was so curious, I was feeling shy, but I was so curious that I went to him and I asked him, who are you? Who are you? He said, in a very humble way, he said, my name is Ase Bhaktivedanta Swami, and I'm a disciple of His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And he said, where are you coming here? And he said, actually, I'm crying because, he said, why are you crying? He said, I'm crying because my Guru Maharaj gave me an impossible mission. He asked me to go to the West and preach in English language to the West, And he said, actually, I'm leaving tomorrow for America. He had just a small bag with him. He said, I'm leaving tomorrow for America. And so I need really the blessings. And we know that Prabhupada, the day before, he was in Bombay actually, before leaving, but the few days before, he came to Mayapur and asked the blessings from his Guru Maharaj and from all the great associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and because that was the place, Advaita Bhavan, where Nityananda, Advaitacharya, they would meet and plan for the spreading of the movement, so Prabhupada would come and he said, I'm leaving tomorrow, and that's why, and he said, I'm praying for their blessings because this is what I am, I cannot do this, and he said, I need your blessings too, he prayed this to this Pujari, and the Pujari, if I have any blessing, you get them, and he left, and some years later, suddenly he was doing puja in his temple, and he saw coming in, he saw some white sadhus, shaved head, like Westerners, and they after they left a magazine, and he went to see the magazine, and he was looking at this Back to Godhead, and then he recognized in the picture the same Swami who left a few years before. And then he said, I realized that he had been successful. Far out. So I was just thinking when we were just reading this, how the movement spread, and you see that from Mukunda or Janaki, the way Prabhupada would deal is very simple. He would teach them whatever he knew, like cooking, playing with danga. He had to teach everything himself because nobody knew anything, So he did this, and they were trained, and then they went to themselves to open new centers. They did the same thing. So basically, Prabhupada said always this, that you learn something, and then you teach it, and you train others. He gave this instruction to many devotees. So actually, from this we can understand, of course, you have to have the purity and the deep Krishna consciousness to give it. You cannot give what you don't have. But if you have Krishna consciousness to a certain level, if we have, developed Krishna consciousness to a certain level, whatever it is, and we know something, when people come, just train them. One time I asked Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, he was in Noisy-le-Grand in Paris, in the temple, and Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, Guru Maharaj, he was very expert to preaching to the scientists, because he was a scientist himself, and he organized big conferences, and after one of his classes I asked him, but because we felt fired up, that you can preach to the scientists. I said, but if, for example, myself, because he was organizing these conferences, so they would come and stay for a long time, for a few days. And I said, but what can I do with them? I don't know science, for example, how can I... He said, you can show them how to play cartels. Some whatever, these people like when you show them to do, you show them learn, you teach them something, like sometimes they feel shy, they don't ask, but they even play mridanga, simple things, and or anything, or cooking, and so they like when you show them to cook. So it's might be an inspiration for us when we go to different cities, like now Sankirtan devotees are doing, like not only sit and speak philosophy, but also show them how to do practical things, and they would appreciate it, I feel like this is very simple when you see how Prabhupada preach, and when Mataji was saying also, when Prabhupada disciple was saying, when he came to the West, Prabhupada, what he did, he sat in the Tomping Square Park, Golden Park or something, somewhere under a tree, and he chanted Hare Krishna, very simple tune, also, not something like very elaborate tune like we do sometimes, and that's how he spread, because he had full faith in Lord in him. So in a way we can get inspiration from this Prabhupada Lilamrita, that preaching is not so difficult. You have to give whatever you have to the person with a good heart, to help the person raise to Krishna consciousness platform. Whatever we know, people will feel grateful for this, and when you give it spiritually, you get more. I think that's about time. Anything else? Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Jai Gopal Hari.